Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Briar Harvey. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network, and we are here today on a journey, y'all.
Mm,
So, when Karina and I conceived this class, it was very much about what is it about ritual practice that people aren't understanding? And there are a lot of things that people aren't understanding, but a
yes.
big part of it is how much time it takes, how deep the work goes. And for the purposes of this class, how much of that depends on where you are physically in the world? So today is Yule. It is the winter solstice, the
Mhm.
longest night of the year.
Hmm.
And what that means for you in your locality is going to be wildly variable. So, we want to talk about how you can incorporate these practices into your life in a meaningful way. We're going to be back every Sabbath to talk about what's going on, not just for you and for the wheel, but how you integrate those pieces together.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
join us on this magical journey through your world, because that's what's key here.
Mhm.
Karina, welcome.
Thank you, Briar. I'm so excited and I want to say relaxed about doing this series with you. When you suggested it, I think we were both crying a little because it just felt
Mhm.
so right and so appropriate for the wild times that we're living through. Um, and it's really appropriate to my magic. It's something that I teach everybody who I work with, right? Whether it's one on one or in a long term training, or I really have people try to anchor in to this wheel, right? So if people are new to this idea, I just want to talk about the wheel for a minute. So, you know, I'm going to tell a little story. I was in Malta this past spring and I was visiting the ancient megalithic and Paleolithic temples, the goddess temples. Now, these structures are older than the pyramids. They are older than Stonehenge, right? I think they just got moved down one from from temples that were just discovered or uncovered in Turkey, right? This is a little tiny island, Malta. It's off the tip of Sicily. It's midway between Sicily and Africa, right? Um, these structures were astrological observatories. Okay. So just like we see the images, right, all over in the internet today, right, there'll be pictures of the solstice sun rising through the Stonehenge and the temples that are on the UK. But these temples as well had solar portals, right? So in these 8 foot deep stone walls, right? They have cut opening for when the sun rises on the solstices. And these temples, they also made a hole for when the moon is passing. So there's a moon portal. And I just have to share this because it was so wild to me. There's also 7 small holes for when the Pleiades move across in the night sky,
Wow.
right? So, Humans have always marked the celestial bodies, right, and how they impact us. What we knew and still know is that there are these 4 points during the year, right? The solstices, so winter solstice, the longest night. Summer solstice, the longest day. And the equinoxes, where solar light is equal, right? There's 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night in the spring and in the fall. But there are 8 there. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to interrupt because I just learned the coolest thing that I did not know. On the Roman calendar, the 12 hours of day and night were different in the summer and in the winter because they actually staggered them for daylight hours and nighttime hours.
Mm,
So you still had 12 hours, but they weren't 60 minutes long. Only at spring and autumn were they 60-minute hours. And I thought, I bet that would actually be amazing.
incredible, right? So we've been trying to figure this out and trying to pay attention to it, and it has impacted us. And older cultures than ours, they planned everything according to this solar cycle and the lunar cycles, right? Let's not forget about the moon. Nowadays, even if you are aware of the wheel, people tend to personalize the lunar cycle, right? This is the time of the month of the lunar cycle when I am building intention, manifestation. This is the time when I'm giving thanks for that manifestation coming to fruition. This is the time where I'm looking at, what's not working? What do I need to let go of, right? As the moon wanes. And then there's that between moment of the dark moon, right? A lot of people don't talk about that magic of the dark moon. They talk about the waning, the waxing, and the full, but nobody wants to talk about that dark space, that liminal space,
Mhm.
um, that is neither waning nor waxing. It's the between, the what I call the tomb time, womb time, right? It is so fertile. It is so powerful. And we just sort of like forget about it. People don't want to talk about the dark times. So right now on the wheel year, we are coming out of the solar annual tomb womb time, which happens between Samhain, right? It's that cross quarter um, between Samhain and winter solstice. This is the same as the dark moon time of year. This is a time traditionally, or in my wheel year, right? In my personal wheel year, because I live in a place where we have this season of it is so dark here so early, and we move like right out of autumn into this liminal space. It's not winter yet. It's cold. Temperatures are dropping, but it's dark. And then we do that weird thing that we do with the clocks, right? So you have even less sunlight, right? I call it the tomb to womb time because we're coming from Samhain, which is traditionally celebrated as a time to connect with the dead, with the ancestors. And that is cross-cultural in the Northern Hemisphere, right? It is cross-cultural across the board. No matter where you look, that is the time of year where we connect with the dead. They're here all the time. We can connect and should connect. We shouldn't just limit it to that day, right? Offerings on the ancestor altar all the time, right? If we want their support, if we want to love them, if we want to say thank you, if we want to, um, I'm not going to go into the healing our ancestors line because that's a whole other workshop.
We'll save that for the end of the wheel.
We'll save that for then. So this time that we're coming out of is a time of deep rest, of deep internal processing, of slow days. Um, it's soup time, right?
Soup and hibernation. That's
Soup
what
and
I do this
hibernation.
time of year.
Yeah. So those first weeks after Samhain, I usually pretty much allow myself to crash, right? To just like a bear, right? I go deep, deep, deep into hibernation. I usually take those weeks off to give myself the permission, right? To just, this is not the time for building. This is not the time for manifesting. This is not even the time for planning. This is the time that the overculture says we should squeeze in the days between Christmas and the New Year, right? when your cheese coma happens, right? From
Cheese and planning, because those things go together in
right,
any way.
right. So you've got like a day or two post Christmas, when you crash and you let yourself rest. And then you're right into, oh my God, it's a new year. I have to plan the whole new year right now, right? Um, and we can't do that kind of planning, not deeply, not well, in a matter of 4 days. So sometime in this period between solstice and between Samhain and winter solstice, something shifts, right? The energy shifts. We're talking about Sabbath seasons here, not a day. We're talking about what is happening in that 6 weeks between these 8 points on the wheel. So at some point, and this is going to be you, this is going to be your intuition, this is going to be your paying really close attention to the land where you live, your own patterns, your own energy levels, right? And honoring those. So where I live, this is a time where all of the energy in the trees, I'm surrounded by these beautiful old maple trees, goes deep down into the earth. And that's where I let my energy go. But at some point in that 6 week period, the energy starts to shift and I start to like rub my eyes and be like, oh, you know, well, now what am I going to do? Right? Now what am I going to do? And that's the beginning of the momentum toward winter solstice. That's the time of year. It's usually right around American Thanksgiving, right? It's about somewhere in that 3 week period, but it can be very short, can be very long. It's about paying attention to what's actually happening. And so that's when I start pulling out my calendars, right? That's when I pull out my highlighters and my big giant post-it notes that are colorful and my sheets and sheets of paper. And I just start writing lists down, right? It doesn't matter what's on them, right? It's not like this is my list for work and this is my list for the house and it's everything. It's just brain dump. And then I start sorting. But that's my process. That's how my brain works, right? Is like dump it all out, then you can sort it. So here we are now at winter solstice. By now, my lists, my goals are done, right? My map of how I'm going to attain those goals over the course of the next solar cycle are finding their ways into calendars and plans, right? I want to talk about, hold on a minute. Okay. So I'm going to take the lens back out from micro, that's mine and how this operates for me, to the macro. Every culture in the world, again, in the northern hemisphere, in the southern hemisphere, they're doing the opposite, right? It's summer solstice there. Has in every tradition, religious tradition, spiritual practice in the world has some celebration of calling back of the solar light,
Yes.
you know? Um, so as we call the light back, as we welcome the light back, as we, where I live, try to feel the sun's rays on your skin, which honestly doesn't happen until late March where I live, right?
Right.
So on this long dark night, for me, this is a moment to, it's the birth of the sun child, right? That's SON and SUN. This is the birth night. This is the darkness, literally in the pangs of labor, right? And so my practices have to do with like breathing through, right, with the darkness to bring that solar light, that new infant, slippery, wet child of the new year into birth.
I hadn't thought of this period as labor, but it
Mm,
absolutely is.
yeah, yeah. When my eldest was in preschool, I went into her class, and the kids all made these little um, dark female figures holding a sun right in front of their belly, right, for winter solstice, because I thought, yeah, there's all of this Christmas stuff happening, and can we talk about what maybe connect the origins of that birth story being maneuvered and manipulated to this time of year, right? Um, but it's a birth story, just like the Christ story is a birth story, right? Um, what I want to suggest to people is like, this is an infant year. It is brandy new. Don't make a lot of demands of it, right? We are
Mm.
still, right? Don't try to make it do a gajillion things. It's a baby. It's so tender. It has lots of time to grow, right? So, something about this wheel year and how I am hoping to help people approach it is to slow down when it's time to be slow, right? We don't, like I said, I don't feel that sunlight where I live on my skin until the middle of March, around the spring equinox, maybe a little bit later. So this light isn't even really impacting me yet, right? So,
Well, if labor is Samhain to Yule, then Yule to at least the equinox is that fourth trimester period. And you're just supposed to lie in there, get to know the new baby.
right. And in older cultures, right, in history, this was not a time for farming. You weren't running outside to put seeds in the ground, right? You weren't pulling weeds. You were sitting home. You were knitting. You were making the thread that you were going to knit with for the year, right? You were, cooking soups on the fire that you had to keep going, right? And yes, people would come together to keep each other's company, to tell stories, to be together, to maybe play a little music and dance around, the cabin on inside, right? So this is still a very it's a tender time, right? The overculture never gives us tender time, never gives us tomb time, never gives us womb time, never gives us the time to be with the infant child, right? In a way, this work with the year of the wheel is really an anti-capitalist tool, right? That asks us gently, can you take back your time? And if you can't take back your time because you are on the schedule and you've got to um, show up at your job, right? Um, I have the privilege of working for myself, and likely because I couldn't do that world with the way that I'm wired, and my craft, my spiritual path is so demanding of me that I had to opt out of that system and do this work instead. So this is anti-capitalist work because it asks us, where are you putting your time, and what is being demanded of you, what is being taken from you, and what can you take back, right? I'm not telling people to quit your job and go live in a cave and, make an opening so that you can see when the solstice sun is rising. I'm saying, what can you take back? What energy can you bring into your home? So this time of year, we've got candles lit in our home, or we've got twinkly lights all around, right? We've got the evergreen tree comes into the house, if that's your tradition, right? In my home this time of year, I have all of my lights on dimmer switches, and all my lights are turned down low,
Mm.
right? It's not dark in my home, but it is dark outside, and I keep the light really dim. It's an atmospheric change that signals our soma, right, to relax, to come down, to be soft, right? What else can we do? Soft music, not the driving music, right? That's for summer. That's for dancing around bonfires, right? Soft, gentle music. People like to put simmer pots on their stoves. I just have a pot of chai going all the time, decaf chai. You can get it on my website. I make it myself, and that's just simmering all the time. And so you can go get a cup of that, or there's usually a pot of soup on the stove, so you can go get a bowl of that. But it's a cozy time. Just like, remember, if you had the privilege, right, and you had children, those days, those weeks, postpartum, when you're just resting in bed with that child, right? Tracing the curl on the back of their head, right? Smelling that new infant scent, right? It's a
Nothing like
very
fresh
gentle time.
baby.
Nothing like it, right? Listening to the little gurgly sounds and learning to discern what's a cry, what's a comfort, what's hunger, right? These are all things that we can look for in our year of the wheel, right? Where is my own cry for comfort, for rest, for the kinds of foods that I want to eat? Is the light too bright in here? Is the sounds too overwhelming in here, right? So this wheel year, this year of the wheel, is about learning what it is that you need. I'm speaking about a very specific place in New England, right? On the top of a mountain where the horizon, like, I'm looking at the horizon, it is about 300 feet from my window. the sun drops there because I'm at the top of a mountain, right? So there's just like a little hill left, and then the sun drops. So it's very peculiar to where I live. And this is what I'm talking and pointing to, the hyper local reality of where you live. When I lived in Florida for um, 3, 2, I don't know, some amount of time that felt really long. But I went there because I thought, seasonal affective disorder. I need sunlight on my skin. I want to live near the ocean. Um, and trying to track the year of the wheel there was really difficult for me, mostly because I had tracked it my whole life in this region. And it was so, so different. I remember leaving a grocery store, and the sky must have been a very particular color that triggered in me the idea that it was cold outside. It looked like a New England sky in winter. And I remember walking out of the grocery store, and I had clenched my whole body. I had braced against the cold,
Mm.
right? And of course, I step outside and it's 85 degrees. And I was like, oh, and like pull your shoulders back and open up to that warmth and open up to that heat. You don't have to do this. But I think part of seasonal affective disorder in the north, anyway, where it's cold, part of it is the light and the lack of vitamin D. But part of it is the hunching in, because what does that do? How do our postures change our chemistry? So if we're braced and we're hunched in, the chemistry in our body responds to that, right? And makes us overprotective, right? How does that show up in our behaviors, right? Where I live, people say, "Oh, those New Englanders, they're cold and they're heartless." And it's not, we are cold. But the behavior that arises out of the chemical response to what the body is doing to protect itself from cold makes us inward facing, right? We're not walking around open with our shoulders back and our heart open and our head up. We're trying to stay warm. But that posture, Brene Brown talks about this. The posture changes the chemistry in the body, and that changes the mood, and the mood changes the behavior. It's all connected, right? And this is still connected to the wheel of the year work. When is the time of year when you go inward? When is the time of year when you might feel like, am I depressed? Why am I tired all the time? Why am I exhausted? Right? Part of that is the overculture. Part of that is look outside your window. What is the temperature? How much light are you getting? And if your body is telling you you're exhausted, lay down. Curl up.
Yeah, I definitely want to unpack the ways in which we can honor the year wheel while also having to be involved with the overculture.
Right. So it's a question of, what can I take back? What can I take back? Can I say, I would like vacation time? Not in the summer, so I can run around like a maniac with my list of sites that I have to see and all the things I have to do, right? Because we even approach our vacation from how much can I get in this short amount of time? And we come home from vacation exhausted, right? Can you take vacation time during the winter for not to go to the sun, not to get on a plane, but to rest? Or yes, get on a plane and go to the sun, but lay on the beach, Be in the sun. Let yourself decompress. If you can't do that, can you take a couple PTO days? Right? If you can't do that, can you turn down the lights in your house? Can you put some things on dimmer switches or hang up some twinkle lights and just have those? Can you have nights where you just light candles? What kind of incense can you burn in your house to bring in that quieting energy, right? This is about decompression. This is about shutting off that busy brain that we have been conditioned by capitalism to go, 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 get, go, get, go, get, go. Where can we take back in small little gestures that we ritualize along this wheel that turns? How can we drop in to this season? So winter solstice to, I call it Candlemas. Other people call it Imbolc. I tend to do Brigid work at that time of year, which is really creative writing, healing, transformational work. And there will be a time, right, in this 8th of the year where we begin to move from that quiet, quiet, quiet toward, again, what's next? What's coming? What wants to be created? Right? What needs to be transformed? Right? What needs to be ironed out? Right? So if I'm using the metaphor of the deity Breed, right? She's the goddess of bards, of sacred wells, of blacksmiths, and midwifery, right? So we like to only talk to her. So I put that in transformation, right? Because she's a midwife on both ends of the tomb and the womb, right? What needs to die now? What is coming to life now? What needs that kind of death to life transformation then? What needs to be created? What needs to go in the fire? So my fires of creativity are sparked. So sometime between winter solstice and February 1st, we start to feel the shift of like, I need more light in here. I need to create something. I need to build something, right? And honoring that. So these seasons, if we can sink down, take a look at where we're living, what is the light doing? What is the vegetation doing? And remember that we're part of that. We're not outside of nature. Nature isn't out there. We are it. We are it. We've been convinced that there's some separation between us and everything else in nature. But to get back to your question, the sinking into the wheel is going to ask us to be really curious, right? What do I need at this time of year? Let me look back on my personal history. What is happening for me at that time of year? Am I building? Am I sick? Am I moving house? Am I starting new projects? Am I ending relationships? Am I having babies? Am I writing books? What's happening for you? And I mean, not this year, all the years,
Mm-hmm.
all the years. Look back at your wheel. When do these kinds of things happen? When was I traumatized? What time of year? You recognize that we can be re-traumatized, or our trauma can be triggered just by the slant of light coming in a room. just by the scent of some vegetation on the wind. And we're like, what happened? Nobody did anything to me. Why am I right? And we look back and we say, oh, it was that. That happened this time of year, right? So all of the ways that our senses are interacting, our head is up here doing stuff, right? But our senses are paying attention and are manipulated by the scent, how windy is it? How sunny is it? Is it pouring rain? Is there a blizzard? What's growing outside? Oh, those flowers. They all, forsythia always is the first bloom of bright yellow, right? Where I live. That's my moment of, oh, spring is here, right? But those kinds of environmental sensations, right, can trigger our trauma because some part of us is remembering what happened to us. So traumas, when are you celebrating? When did beautiful things happen, right? When did you graduate? When did, all of those kinds of questions are the questions that I ask my people to sit down and map it out. So part of what I'm offering alongside these podcasts are some of those questions and maps to help people start to get a better sense of not just what am I supposed to do on winter solstice, on Yule, because it's a pagan holiday and I call myself a pagan, right? Or because it's Christmas, or because it's Hanukkah, or because it's Kwanzaa, right? Not what am I supposed to do? What have I done? What is happening for me? What is happening on the land where I live? This is how we reclaim it for ourselves and give ourselves permission to set up rituals. And I don't mean like community rituals. I mean rituals for you that honor you, that honor your personal wheel of the year. What little things can you do in your environment that remind you, oh, I'm supposed to still be going slow, when in our world, right? We're self-employed. We're like, what am I going to be doing in March? Right? How am I going to, what social media do I have to prepare to be launching in March for the thing that I'm doing in May? Right? And because we are on this wheel with capitalism, right? And marketing. And if you're not on that wheel, you're influenced by that wheel,
Mm-hmm.
deeply influenced by that wheel. You're given the reminders of what those rituals are supposed to be all day, every day. You're being marketed to, right? So what can you do? Sorry about my phone. What can you do to take it back? Even if it's just a little thing, right? When we start to place little rituals, little cues in our homes, in our on our schedules, they begin to add up, and we begin to actually live, even if we're doing the capitalist thing, right? There's still part of us that is like, no, this is mine. And that is revolutionary.
Yes.
Revolution might be huge, might be people marching in the streets, might be all of the apocalyptic visions that we've been force fed for the past 30 years. But it might be turning your lights down low. It might be putting your slippers on when you walk in the front door. It might be keeping a pot of chai on the stove in the winter. Simple things, really simple magics that make profound differences in our well-being, in our personal power to say, that's mine. Yeah.
So, how do I identify these things when my weather and environment is consistently 72 and sunny?
Uh-huh. Well, I think that you still have to look at vegetation, right? When is planting season? When is harvest season, right? Is it because of the way that we have commodified agriculture? Is it all the time? Is it always planting season? Is it always harvest season? I was shocked when I moved to Florida. I thought it would always be harvest season. I thought we will always be having like the freshest, because it's sunny all the time. Because it's sunny all the time, some things can't grow. And
Hmm.
because of the composition of the soil there, and that really Florida is just wet limestone, right? Um, it's not a great place for growing. So here I am in the like middle, sort of south of Tampa area, and all of my vegetables are still coming from the Midwest. And by the time they get there, they were really in really bad shape. So it's about paying attention to where you are, but it's also paying attention to what is actually happening on the solar wheel, right? What is actually happening? How am I responding to this 6-week season, right? Which is really sort of, if the Sabbath is the pinnacle of power, right? Is the high point, right? Where the power is strongest. Then you've got sort of a falling off of the energy, right? It dips down and then it starts to build toward the next Sabbath, right? So I'm very interested in that, what's going on, not just on the Sabbath day, because these are seasons, not just a holiday, right? For gathering together and celebrating the high point of the power of the season.
We
That's
literally call
real.
them high holidays.
Yep. Yep. Um, but it's a marking of a seasonal shift. And then, because capitalism, because of commodification, because of colonialism, of our old traditions, of all of our old traditions, right? We just give ourselves that one day to think about it. But what if we think about it every day? What's happening today? What is the sun doing today? What is the temperature doing today? What kind of food do I want today? How much rest do I need today? How many people do I want to communicate with today? What am I feeling compelled to do? So I've been talking a lot about rest and naps and quiet and low lighting and hibernating and womb time, tomb time, postpartum time, energy, because that's the energy of now. But when we get to summer solstice, it's going to be, what are we planting in our gardens? Who are we going to see? Can I squeeze a run into the beach? Can I, go to that bonfire that my friend is having at our house that I don't go to in the winter? Right? But I'm dying to get there in the summer, right? I want to be around more people. So this very internal process is simultaneously external. Like, what am I wanting? Where do I want to go? Who do I want to see? What kinds of foods am I craving? Right? What kinds of experiences am I looking for? Am I hungering for? And giving ourselves permission to give ourselves those experiences, right? So this is the beginning of the magic, right? Is reclaiming the whole of the year, not just the 8 days, but the whole of the year, according to your hyper-local region and your really personal, really individual needs, which may be in conflict with somebody else you live with, right? They may be like, I want to have a big party. I want to cook steaks on the grill, on winter solstice, right? And you're like, ooh, no, I just want soup and like mashed potatoes and carbs and sweets and cheese, right? Cheese, please. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how do we work on integrating our needs with the needs of the people who we cohabitate with?
Oh, honey, that's like a whole other workshop, right?
Ain't it?
um, I mostly work with women, you know. I mostly work with women, or trans women, and our enculturation is such that we easily give over our needs to the needs of others. A lot of times we don't even know what our needs are. We know what everybody else needs, right? And we make sure that their needs are met. This is how we've been enculturated. This may be less so for the generations coming up behind. But we really are taught to be hyper observant of other people's needs and wants and desires and schedules. So when we first turn that focus upon ourselves, first of all, we're going to deal with shame, guilt, all the voices in our head saying you're being selfish, you're being selfish, you're being selfish, you're being selfish, right? You're a bad mom, you're a bad spouse, you're a bad coworker, you're a bad assistant, you're a bad friend, you're right, because you're focusing on yourself. So first, the shame, the guilt, and the fear of losing people, of losing these relationships is going to arise. That's the first thing, right? And it's so strong that people hearing me talk about how you're going to set up your household are already saying, not everybody, but some people are already saying, well, I can't do that. Take a breath, right? This is in my writing about big crone energy, about the good girl manual. This is the stuff that I'm going after, right? It's not about not caring about other people's needs. It's not about taking up all the oxygen in the room and sort of coming through like a bulldozer and saying, well, now it's going to be like this. Don't get me wrong. In some households, that's how it has to go, right? It's about saying my needs count too.
My
And
needs matter.
my
Mhm.
needs matter. Yeah. My desires, my wants, my moods, my motivations, my magic is not something I'm going to hide like in the corner of the closet that I cleared out so I could have an altar, right? My needs, my spiritual needs, my physical, emotional, intellectual, space, environmental needs matter as much as everybody else that I live with. Again, for some of us, this is like, of course, right? Because we've been doing the work for 30 years, right? We've been learning to say those things for 30 years. We've been learning to love ourselves enough to require the people that we live with accommodate our needs in equal measure to the way that we have been taught to accommodate everyone else's needs. So again, I talked earlier about small revolutions, right? This can feel revolutionary. This can feel really scary to people, to take up space, to demand what you need. And I say that I work mostly with women. This isn't to say that men don't need this work as well. You just have a different life experience and different societal, cultural indoctrination that I have not lived through. And so for me to try to work that through with men, and boy, you men, you need to work on
Oh,
it.
please do this work.
Please,
For the
please,
love of
please,
all the gods, do
please
this
do the
work.
work, right? Because you need it, because we need it, because we all need it, right? But I work particularly with women because that's been my life experience. For me to try to work with men through their issues around taking up space, and I don't mean physical space, I don't mean man spread, right? But taking up space from a heart-centered, spirit-centered place, I can't do it except through an outsider's lens. And so you need to find healthy men. Please don't go to the men's movement. But you need to find your own way to interpret what I'm saying here, because this is for everybody. But I do tend to focus on women's experience, female identified experience, because that's been my experience. I am my research lab, right? Me and people that I've been working with for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right? We are the research laboratory. What are you noticing, right? Where were we? That was a little bit of a tangent. Oh, taking up space in your own home, right? Like
Taking up, yeah.
making that manifest in relationships that are long-standing with different kinds of patterns, right?
Mhm.
Pattern breaking is hard. Pattern breaking is hard. Change is hard. And especially when we are having to negotiate change and how the changes that we want to make in family systems or workplace systems or community systems that are set up a particular way, to come in and say, hey, can we look at it this way? Right? The first response is the person is afraid. And the first response from you before you ever approach them is you're afraid of what's going to happen. Because we know you don't just change one thing when you make a change in a system, right? If I put one drop of a chemical solution in a glass of water, all the water in the glass is transformed, is changed. So if we ask for one thing, the dynamic begins to change, right? I think in my experience, our partners and our families know when we are not happy, when we are not living into the fullness of who we are. And most family systems are willing to accommodate. You
The
have to be the
healthy
clear
ones,
community. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. You have to be a clear communicator, you have to say without being shrill, because in your voice is shrill because you're afraid. It's not because you're being shrill, right? You have to be able to say, hey, I've been thinking, I'm missing this. This is important to me. I want this. I want this in my life. Look, I know women who have never since their children were born, had a closed door in their house, right? They've never peed alone since the child could toddle into the bathroom behind you, right? What do we do about that? You
That
know,
is the question.
that is the question. And when I tell people what I did about that, I said, I'm empathic, right? So I see all of the stuff that happens in the body that defends themselves and is offended by me saying, I had to, I worked from home sometimes, I had a sign on the back of my office chair that said no, because I was recording, right? Or I was on the call, or I was teaching,
Mhm.
and my kids would just come running in. And sometimes they still came running in. That was okay. But I literally, when they were old enough to understand, was very open with them and said, look, this is how mommy earns the money to buy your shoes and the groceries and if I can't do that, then we don't have what we need. Was I placing the responsibility for my income on them? No, I was bringing them into the circle of responsibility, right? And so they learned, and they'll still say, uh-oh, mom's teaching, or like my kid today, I'm like, I'm on a podcast, don't bother me, and keep the dog out, right? And they know, like, don't come in here unless we need sirens, right?
Literally, it's got to be a
Right,
life or death
right.
emergency.
If the
Otherwise, I
fire
don't want to
truck,
hear about it.
the ambulance, or the police need to be called, that's when you can come in the room, right? Um, I was a solo parent, right? I didn't have to negotiate that with a partner. And for some of you, that may seem like that must have been nice, but it really was hard, right? Um, so my children grew up with me negotiating for my own needs, because if I didn't, I don't think I'd be sitting here today. I would have lost my mind, or I would have gotten hurt somehow from being overexhausted, overexerted. Um, so in our little pod, we all learned how to negotiate for our needs. And here's the thing, when you teach your children, when you model that for your children, they know how to negotiate for themselves when they grow up and go out into the world. They know how to negotiate for themselves in their friend groups. So it's more about modeling for them a way of asking, demanding that your needs be met.
And I will say personally, in my relationship, that having requirements about my needs has ultimately made my partnership better. And I think that being able to emphasize those needs will show you one of two things. One, that you have a partner worth keeping, or that you don't, and you need to
Right.
negotiate your needs on your own.
Right.
But you have to ask.
Yes. And like I started to say earlier, I think that our partners, if they're healthy, right, are relieved. I think that they're like, oh, I didn't know you needed that. Of course, I want to give that to you. Of course, you should have that. Sleeping in on Sunday morning, or going out with your friends to a concert or a museum or lunch or whatever, going out by yourself. just because you need to be by yourself, right? Or keeping the lights down low at a certain time of year. I think that if we're in healthy relationships, um, our partners are going to, it's not an accommodation, right? These aren't special needs that you are asking to be accommodated. They are your needs. And if that's your partner, your family, your cohort that you live with, we want to know what each other's needs are, and we want to help meet them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to leave folks with, we'll talk more about the dip between Yule and Candlemas on the next episode.
We
And
will.
let's leave folks with some things that they can do between now and then.
Between now and then, well, I have a guided meditation that you can access through my website on the winter solstice Sabbath season, right? So if you're listening to this on solstice or after solstice, don't ever think that my Sabbath meditations are only for the day. This is for that day. This is a special ritual that I'm doing for that day.
You're
This is
never behind.
you can't be behind in this work, right? You cannot be behind in it. You didn't miss it because we're doing it on the Sabbath. Okay. So guided meditations are available. And I'm also making available some worksheets, right? Some writing prompts. And if you're not a writer and you don't like journaling and you don't like that, that's okay. Just read the prompts. Just stick the question in your mind and start mulling it over. See what comes up for you. And if you're really ambitious, you can start filling out some of these worksheets that are wheel years, right? What happens for me? What has happened for me? What do I need? So I'm going to ask all of the questions in this little really mini workbook. Like don't get your hopes up too much, right? It's a very small little package of PDFs, but what's in there for you becomes huge, right? Because you're doing your own research based upon the questions that I'm asking. I'm a good question asker, right? I'm a good thought prompter. So those things are available. And between now and Candlemas, just notice. Just tap in a little deeper rather than like, oh, the next Sabbath is then. See if you can pinpoint when is that midpoint. It's not on the calendar.
No.
It's not on the calendar. And I'm going to be totally sacrilegious and say the Sabbaths aren't on the calendar either, right? The equinoxes, the sun is doing what it does. The cross quarter days,
Yeah, it's a little timey-wimey.
it's pretty timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly, right? The ancestors start marching around outside my windows, way before October 31st, right? And the impulse to, put seeds in the ground, that usually happens for me around Candlemas. I'm like buried in seed catalogs, right? Because I'm reaching for that sun that's going to come on my skin, for that hands in dirt. So pay attention to when is the winter solstice season ending as we begin the march or the walk, the meandering pathway to the next Sabbath. And you'll know because there's like something in the air is different. It's not just the light. Something in the air is different. Your weather is doing something different. Your body is wanting something different. So hyper personal, hyper local, anti-capitalist, See what you can start to reclaim for yourself. Or if you can't reclaim it yet, note it. Note what you want to be reclaiming. So that's what I would leave people with for the work, right? It's really play. It's really playful. It's really joyous. It's really a curious journey of just self-discovery and discovery on this wheel. So play, have fun with it. Please do not make this grueling work, because that's not
The
how magic
opposite of
works.
what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's not how magic works. You gotta let it be light. Be curious. Yeah. So that's what I would leave people with.
Karina,
Oh,
this is going to be an incredible year.
yeah. Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
This is probably a place where this is my one take that out, where I just ask, can I say thing? Um, the other way people can do this is to work with me one-on-one.
Well, of course they can. Please
Yeah.
tell us how we find you.
Thecroneherself.com. I offer big crone energy sessions, is what I call the one-on-one work with me. People have mistaken it like I'm trying to foster this big crone energy in other people. That's great if that happens for you. I'm running the big crone energy. You're coming in to work with me to learn how to do maybe these very simple things, like ask for what you need, or give yourself permission to do what you need for yourself, so that you can be more whole, so that you can be better nourished, so you can take better care of yourself. And by extension, honey, when your well is full, the care that you can extend to other people is exponentially
Yes.
better care. It is free of resentment. It is free of all of the stuff that makes us go, when we look out up upon our day or our week or our season. So big crone energy sessions are for you. And I work with people. I call myself a whole life priestess. Okay. That means if you're working on your small business and you need to be able to be giving yourself permission. I had one just come to mind, like massage therapist. Why are you doing all of your laundry at the end of the day? Okay. Um, whether you need help to, sorry, it's such a big switch in gears here.
I know, from
Um,
teaching to pitching, it's hard
yeah,
and you're doing
I'm
so
doing
well.
it. I'm doing it. So whether it's small business, whether it's this wheel of the year that you really want to go deep with a guide, right? So we can together do this excavation work, this deepening work, and this giving self permission work. Um, Big Crone Energy sessions are a great place to do that. But go to my website, read what I have to offer there. There's really nothing that is out of my wheelhouse. And if it is, I will tell you. Okay. I've been a teacher and, uh, a life coach for longer than the word life coach has been around. Okay. I have life coach credentials because it seemed like a thing that I was going to have to say that I was, in order to continue to do the work that I had always been doing. So check it out. Set up a call so we can see if we jive together. After listening to this, if you're going to you're going to like working with me or not. Right. But let's set that up so we can get started. I offer 6, 9, and 12-month programs.
Delightful. All right,
Yay.
y'all. If you are coming to this through the network, there will be links to the workbook and the meditation in the show notes. And we will make that available to subscribers as the year continues. I'm very, very excited
Me too.
about what's going to happen this year, Karina. It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be amazing. Thank you so much for doing this with me, Briar.
Mhm. I adore you. Y'all, thank you for watching, listening, being here, and we will see you round about the 1st of February.
Happy
Bye
winter
now.
solstice.